It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha, it's Feedback Friday, and Momo is with us again. Right, Momo? Yes, good boy. Mwah. A lot of feedback to get to this week. There was a lot of really good debate in the comments this week. And longtime viewers, this makes me super, super, super happy when people can go back and forth and express themselves and offer things. And there were too many comments to pick from. I was just reading and reading and reading, and it's like, oh, I have to record a video. All right. So if you like supporting this sort of content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. I will put a Leanna Cares link on this video. I've been doing it only on Wellness Wednesdays, but some people were like, hey, you mentioned it and didn't put a link. Okay, sorry about that. I've been trying to measure it. Some spots have opened up again on Wednesday because a couple people moved to Thursday. So if you want to sign up, go ahead or just have a look of what the form says it is. But feedback, I want to get to that because there was a lot. One person checked me on something, and this is where I'd started because, hey, it was a fair point. I find it interesting that in some videos you say that gamers aren't a monolith, yet in others you talk about them collectively as if they are, the people gamers are afraid of, etc. The reason I point this out is a weird paradox going on internally, which I know isn't your fault and I don't mean to come across as blaming you for. Noted, still, fair thing to bring up. There's more to this comment, I will get to it, but I just want to be clear. I mean, heuristics and shorthands are a thing in language that are somewhat unavoidable in this sort of free-form format. But it is fair to point out that, yes, sometimes gamers... it is possible to say that there are certain defining commonalities among the majority of the group and say that something is not a monolith. Both can be true, right? Just because there are certain common themes, like gamers like video games, doesn't mean it's a monolithic experience. And yes, not all gamers have the same level of concerns about certain things, but they're, anyway, I don't want to belabor this. Just fair point. I will keep an eye on the shorthands. They are unavoidable, but this commenter wasn't saying this is a big issue. I just wanted to say fair point. They go on. Generally, when you describe gamers, socially awkward, insecure, etc., you're not describing any gamer I know real life. Every gamer I've met has been, or at least come across as, relatively normal, socially stable, confident people who just happen to play the hell out of Call of Duty, GTA 5, DC Universe, or whatever other addicted MMO is popular at any given time. When I come across someone with the same video game history, mostly from the 80s and 90s that I do, even if it was for similar social reasons, it turns out that in current day, they've grown out of the hobby, both the hobby and their behavior. Some to the point of considering the mental stuff, the teen angst, and video games as kid stuff. The only gamer I've met who is the way you describe is, well, me. Well, you're a real life gamer commenter. So I am describing a gamer you know in real life. You go on. I always figure the reason I've never met anyone like me was that I had a bad childhood and mentally ill and am far, far too emotionally invested in video games. I'd love to meet someone like me in real life for no other reason than being able to talk about my mental issues and video game passions to the same person and feel less awkward that they don't know WTF I'm talking about or can't relate. I still have trouble believing this person exists, or if they do, they're apparently rare enough that I've never met one. When you talk about gamers, you're basically both talking about me, and I feel very alien and isolated most of the time, especially for how I feel about games, and this person I don't think I'll ever meet in real life, as if this is all gamers. Well, I can't say this person truly doesn't exist, because I exist. I can certainly say it isn't all gamers and doesn't seem to be the case for many in this area. I would love for the things you say to apply to all gamers. I would love to make a local friend like me, and usually hope for it on some level whenever I make a new friend. Unfortunately, my in real life social interactions come down to I don't play video games, I only play X. I loved those when I was a kid, or the mental illness, ew. Aw, that at the end is sad. I feel bad for this person. But I can almost guarantee, I don't know where this person lives, and I'm not going to ask because, that's kind of doxing. I'm sure there are other people who are super passionate about games in their area. There seems to be this thing that there is now so much social media and so much socialization that people aren't socializing in real life. Now, obviously, the COVID stuff has been a big factor in that as well. We cannot downplay how serious the impact COVID-19 has had on society of late. But going back to the 80s and 90s, that's, that's significantly pre-COVID. Just because somebody hides their social awkwardness doesn't mean they don't feel socially awkward. Sometimes anyway. But yeah, I talk to a lot of people that fit that profile. And yes, I think there's a happy medium between all gamers and a minority of one. I don't know how to make it so that people can meet people with similar interests in their area. Perhaps this is something to discuss. Perhaps this is something that the Song of Sparkle Muffin Discord server that we're working on the rules for can help with. I don't know. Stay tuned to the space. But it's bad that this person feels isolated because of mental illness. They're clearly very intelligent. It was sort of neat to just take a walk through their thoughts in that comment. So hopefully that makes them feel a little less alone. A personal observation as an introvert that happens to talk to a lot of people. There are 3 types of conversational partners I observed. The one who blubbers all about their own trouble and babbles about all their stuff without giving me much chance to talk about myself. The one who is mostly silent themselves, leading to babbling on and on about nerdy hobbies and all, making me in the long run question if I just overwhelm them with my multi-tracked railway of nerd thoughts. A person who is actually allowing back and forth conversations with tangents on both sides just flow into naturally. This is rare. It is really difficult to find these people. It might even be easier to find them among people who are not in your personal nerd spaces, but come from completely different geek spaces, or are even, dare I say it, close to being normies. And this is one of the features in geek spaces where I'm not sure if it might be a flaw, but there is this tendency of one-sided interest onslaught from both sides. That's an interesting turn of phrase. One-sided interest onslaught, which makes video games kind of a comfortable fit. It's overall just a one-sided controllable interaction. Most NPCs in video games tell you more about themselves than they ask you what you're thinking, and even those questions are indirectly only there to game your reputation towards said character. There's an accidental manipulative undertone in this that isn't making it the most helpful tool to get better at real-world discussions. And I admit, that is something I cannot stand with NPCs when they give you their life story, because people just don't do that. So yeah, that's something I've noticed too. Which on a game design tangent is something I really dislike. There we go. I would love games to simulate these in-depth back and forth conversations where both sides have a chance to equally share and discuss things. In my very rose-tinted memories, the discussions with Fall from Grace and Planescape had that vibe, but they would have to be much bigger than they were. I want a game where basically every quest and probably every stage of a quest is a starting point for involved discussions with your party members, not just for hints and tips, but purely for this type of simulated interaction. Well, that's what I dream about at the least, and my personal take on a game that could actually help communicate how well equal communication works. Yeah, I've had similar dreams of let's make a game that actually teaches socialization through simulated socialization. That's one thing I've wanted to work on too. We're picking at that in Song of Sparkle Muffin. I think it's going to be one where we'd have to experiment it in a few games, so that wasn't the point, and then really do it. I found Planescape Torment also to be one where the dialogues felt more human than the average. That is something of a gamification. It is something of a design thing where is the character you're playing you and therefore they don't have to speak on your behalf, or is the character somebody else but then you're putting words in their mouth? It's a design challenge in that regard, and again, that's one of those things that I am cheating by having all the characters be characters. You don't create a Witcher in the Witcher games, right? It's Geralt. That's one way to sort of make it work. Maybe there are others. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, the one-sided interest onslaught is a very real thing. And I think sometimes it's hard to spot, that kind of twigged when I saw some of the ridiculous takes on Horizon Forbidden West. I'm not going to get into those because I don't want to touch the poop, but one-sided interest onslaught also applies to, so-called social justice warriors where, just they throw around words like racist and sexist and homophobic and never bother to really prove their case in their assertions. It's just an onslaught. And they care very much, but does that necessarily make them right? No, an overabundance of caring doesn't make you right, right? Okay, so simulated interactions when it comes to the characters in video games definitely feels more accurate. As for the how and why of people still being awkward in spite of those simulated interactions, I think the medium attracts a lot of people who fear social reprisals from their real-world socialization, like you mentioned. And I go a step further to say that video games can only work to counteract that fear if you as the player are actively seeking to do so. Very, very fair. Video games cannot make a person take a message or learn a lesson that they don't want to accept. Very fair point. Another person's simulated interactions is definitely a better term than parasocial, especially for video games. The whole stigma of the awkward or creepy or asocial gamer comes from a lack of understanding for how different modes of interactions might cultivate different social skills at varying rates, emphasis on different aspects. Any virtual or simulated interaction is still interaction, and people are getting stimulation from many different sources, especially in the last few years. For example, people who grew up without the internet find it hard to grasp socialization on the internet. Those of us who grew up in the early stages of the internet even find it difficult realizing how those born in the internet age grasp things. In the early days of social media, it was dominated with food pics and proto-Yelp reviews. And I laughed at that because I'm like, wow, I forgot about that. That is true. But yeah, I find it interesting that there's sort of two stereotypes connected to people who are heavy users of technology, right? There's the creepy guy on the keyboard, right? Creepy. Don't get upset about that, please. But then there's the that type of teenage girl on her phone, like totally checked out. Like, oh my God, like Zari from Legends of Tomorrow. Like, oh my God, I'm an influencer. Like, what? Don't take away my phone. My phone is my life, right? It's the same habit. One could claim it is still very antisocial because she's forsaking the people right in front of her for a device. But we treat it as very, very different. And that's interesting to me. It's like the other signifiers about the person make people judge that particular behavior in different ways. And that's probably a fundamental attribution fallacy. Probably. I'm big on the fundamental attribution fallacy lately. So yeah, good point. Another comment. Oh boy, do I feel that task-oriented versus free social interaction thing. I'm not hugely socially awkward, but I'm definitely shy around people I don't know, especially groups. But get going in a video game Discord and I will not shut up. I think that's a fairly common thing of people feel more comfortable talking about things when they know what is acceptable. And I'm really starting to wonder if part of the problem with social interactions are the people setting the boundaries of the groups, the people actually being the host for these social interactions are not doing their jobs, or they're not doing their jobs well. I don't know for sure. This is just a working theory of mine right now. I know, when I host stuff, I make sure to make introductions and offer topics of conversation. And maybe some of those skills are getting lost. And so socialization is an issue accordingly. Food for thought, right? This was an interesting comment. And it made me think a lot. And I've read this comment 3 times and thought about it and then gone back, read it again, thought about it again. But I think Twitch occupies a very weird gray area between social and parasocial because it super depends on what the streamer is doing. Like you are just hanging out and shooting the shit when you stream. It's the real you, it's social. But some Twitch streamers are performing. They're not acting the way they would act when they're, say, playing the same game off screen with their friends, or even in some cases, they're performing a fictional character. And that can be benign, like a VTuber is obviously not really a 700-year-old demon or an anthropomorphized shark or whatever. And any sane person knows that, but you're not really socializing the streamer. You're getting a performance from a fictional anime girl. Or it can be not so benign with some of these streamers who convince vulnerable teenagers they're in an actual relationship if they give them a bunch of money to buy a boyfriend subscription or something. They're still interacting with a fictional character. They just don't know it. But I think to be social and not parasocial, the relationship must be in some sense genuine. And this is interesting that the definition of parasocial has stretched, because my understanding when I learned about parasocial relationships is that one required quality of the parasocial relationship is that the performer, the person on TV or whatever, is unaware of the other person's existence. So it's an artificial, as opposed to simulated communication that, you know, the person on screen does not acknowledge the existence of the other person. Now, these boyfriend subscriptions, I really agree, are part of the reason I started the Leanna Care service is, you know, I discovered through talking with people with OnlyFans, one of the things they do is they do like Zoom chats with their OnlyFans. But the bad choice of words here, but the social lubricant there is, you know, sexy photos. And there is that sort of, I know when I did that sort of thing, not OnlyFans, predated OnlyFans. I'm old, okay? But when I did that kind of thing, I was always really on my guard that someone would get the wrong idea about what the interaction was. And I didn't want anybody to have a bad experience. I didn't want anybody to get their feelings hurt. I wanted everybody to just have fun. But I was also very concerned about my personal safety. And anybody who works in any sort of adult content has similar concerns. There are all these sort of boundaries and guardrails we put up to preserve the fun of the whole thing, but also safety for everybody, emotional and physical safety. And it seems like what this comment is suggesting is that some people are breaking that boundary or muddying that boundary as a financial model. And I have grave concerns about that. And maybe this is something to unpack in full. I mean, I guess because I feel like I'm so introverted that whenever I'm in public, I feel like, you know, there's a bit of performance, if you will, going on. It's not an inauthentic performance. It's a part of me. It's just not the person you get all the time. I mean, okay, I'm wearing an ugly ass house sweater right now. So I'm not going too far, but you know, I don't say everything that's bothering me. I don't necessarily say if I'm, you know, if I've had a really bad day, I don't say how bad the day is. And maybe this is just my particular brand of overdeveloped personal moral code. But I guess there is a big difference between putting on a show that is still a piece of you and completely creating a fiction that is not connected to who you are as a person at all. I don't know how somebody would do that. Quite honestly, every character I play in Boss Fight, there is a piece of me that connects to that character. As disturbing as that might be. Anyway, okay, so moving on to another comment. It could be that many gamers are resistant to attempts to define them because many have been mistreated within their other identifiers, not masculine, feminine enough, unwilling or uninterested in socializing in the acceptable parameters, wanting to define what is popular or worthy of study for themselves, etc., etc. The hypothesis only hits a wall because I witness so many people in other groups who appear to place tremendous emphasis on the marginalized parts of their own identities, yet proceed to go out of their way to marginalize others. I personally don't care much about how others identify themselves as long as it remains identity, that is to say personal. You do you, as they say. But it so often seems to spread like fungus into a you're not really X unless you, and how dare you oppose my identity and its need to define your identity. I'm clearly far superior at identifying what defines you than you are. Protecting myself, retaining my own self-worth does not permit me to respect someone else's need to define me in ways that ring false. I didn't get to where I am, who I am, easily or lightly, demands to stomp around that, and that hard-earned ground with shallow, reflexive, entitled denunciation earns a well-deserved door slammed in the face. Well said. I agree. I have a real, and you know, the next commenter, I put the next commenter next, because it's the no true Scotsman fallacy, right? I mean, it's ridiculous that certain special interest groups or activist groups on one hand, and this is why, like, I checked myself on that compromised heuristic off the top, is that, you know, it's one thing to say women can be many, many things, you know, being a woman should not define your interests, all that stuff, and then they're like, you're not really a woman unless you agree with me, or you're a gender traitor, or whatever. And yeah, I do think that's a fair line. The goal of all of this collectivist action is to allow people to be individuals. The problem is that this collectivist action has taken on sort of a life of its own and crowded out that it's like a perpetual motion machine now, instead of a necessary evil to get to a higher state. And the next comment said, no true Scotsman fallacy lurking here, because yes, in the West, we do lionize the authentic, independent self above all else, at least in our mythology. But it seems to me that a lot of people don't feel comfortable being this authentic self unless everyone else's authentic self is in lockstep with theirs. Because if it isn't, then their authentic self may be wrong, hence shame that comes from group alliance. So for some people, it seems like there's a temptation to judge others' choices as inauthentic or bad if they don't comply with their own. And then this commenter talked about, you know, wearing dresses in hot, humid summers, live in dresses from May to September. And she said, I've had it intimated to me many times that my choice to wear dresses is inauthentic or internally misogynistic, even though I've explained that when it's hot, I overheat in pants, especially jeans. When I overheat, I get nauseous. I authentically hate being nauseous. But it's not an authentic choice because for these other people, dresses carry a lot of baggage, and no truly authentic and liberated woman would choose a dress over jeans when it is 90 in the shade. I also wear long dresses, like sundresses in the summer, for a very, very practical, authentic reason. I'm a ginger and I sunburn, and sunblock is not the funnest thing to wear, especially in crevices like the backs of your knees. Try wearing sunblock SPF like 50 or higher every freaking day in the summer than getting in any car or any seat with a leather or simulation leather upholstery. It feels nasty, especially when it's hot and you sweat. So it is more practical for me to just wear long dresses where my legs are not going to get sunburned, and I only have to put sunblock on my ankles, you know, and the feet if I wear sandals, but it's cooler, and then I don't have that nasty sunblock ectoplasm problem. And I struggled with the perception of the dresses for a while, and then I hit the point where it's like, I do not freaking care. There's so many other things about me that you want to come at me for being too girly. God bless you. You know, like, oh my God. That's not the problem I usually have, but it's frustrating. It's frustrating with people trying to put you in boxes over dumb shit. Another person went the other way. I think you may be overthinking it. Most people default to individualism under most circumstances. It's a lot easier that way. We don't have to share. We don't have to compromise. It's always about us and what we want. Then things get hard and you want or need something from others. Most of us have learned for that to happen, usually have to give something or show worthiness of the effort. Others get selfish and have to have everything for nothing. And the best way in their minds to do so is to elevate yourself and denigrate the other. And that's easiest along something easily identified. We want the collective, but only if the collective entirely agrees with me and what I want and value. And if it doesn't, I'll be right back to valuing my individualism. Spoken like a true individualist. And that is not the way everyone works. And it took me quite a while to recognize that there are some people who do feel really, if they don't have that group identity, they feel like something's missing in them. And like on a very real way, disconnected. It's just a floating abstraction. It just is. They need that. And I try to be sensitive to that. You know, then another person, here you go. Another person said that now there is no room for actual individuals. It may seem like there is because there's 37 different pronouns, but at the end, it boils down to you're either in group and fly the pronoun banner or you're out group and you don't. That's done more to divide than it actually is to make things more inclusive. There you go. Point, counterpoint. Like I said, there was a lot of good debate. There are no wrong answers here. It's just people stating their individual opinions, ironically enough. And I think the exercise here is to see what other people think and go, oh, okay, there actually is a big diversity of opinion here. I know that I don't put pronouns in my social media bios. But my reason is different. I see the utility of some places I work that there's a lot of email correspondence with introductions, and there are some names where it's really hard. They're from other cultures, and to stupid Westerners, you know, we don't necessarily know whether that's a male or female name. And so they put she, her, he, him, whatever in their email signature so people know. That's useful. On social media, to me, I put any detail about myself in that bio. That is a line of attack someone can use against me to get under my skin. And I have zero interest in doing that. Takes all kinds to make a world. Some people want to do it, and that's fine. But it's that you do you thing again, right? More comments. When speaking to my younger friends about this identity stuff, I've come across two types of people a lot. One is the A type of person who seems to collect identities like Pokemon cards. This type confuses me. The second type is those who seem to have reduced themselves to their identities, and these people make me feel sad. I've worked hard not to reduce myself to my disability or my mental health problems, and seeing people do just that makes me want to grab them and tell them they're so much more than that, and people are so much more than that. And I agree with that. I think I'll leave it there. An identifier, and maybe I should use identifiers instead of identity in this video. A few other topics, a few other comments make me believe that. I think the next one as well. Yes, no, it's two more. Yes, something can be a part of you without being the entirety of you. Right. One thing I think fuels this is that so many of the current hot button issues on identity revolve around identities that you are born into and don't have much control over. And while advocating for and feeling a sense of belonging on that level is important, I imagine it can also feel constraining at times, especially when things get politically heated. I've seen people all but state that someone is being a bad insert demographic here because of a certain way they act or belief they hold. I can only imagine what it's like to be both a minority and that you're doing your identity wrong, especially when you had no say in whatever some nebulous governing body decided your particular identity was supposed to act like. At least with gamers, there is that measure of fluidity. You can experiment with things or stick to your preferred niches as you will without much blowback. Heck, if you're rather social and talk a lot with other gamers, there's a good chance someone has convinced you to try a game you otherwise wouldn't have because you didn't think it was for you, was in a genre you don't usually play in. The Yakuza series, for me, never would have touched that series with a 10-foot pole were it not for my Twitch audience. 3 hours into Yakuza 0, I was freaking sold. I was sold. It was, now I evangelize the series. So it's true. This is a topic I was mentioning. I think that many people are seeking to find their own identities. It helps to give them a sense of who they are and what they should do with themselves. It's a form of self-discovery. Unfortunately, I also think that people can confuse their personal identities with hollow labels or shallow demographic markers. An individual person is so much more than just a label or skin color or gender. I also appreciate that Leanna continues to identify as a gamer. I do too. The gamers are dead, articles be damned. And yeah, that's probably a good slice. The idea that personal identity is good and healthy. It is a voyage of self-discovery. Shallow demographic markers are a different thing. And I mean, I think the biggest example of that right now that has actually caused some political issues in the U.S. especially is the idea of whatever you want to call Latin American people and Mexicans, people from South Central America and Mexico. Mexico is in North America. People want to lump all of that into Latino or Latin, if you want to be gender neutral. And those countries have different structures of government. They have different challenges. They don't even speak the same languages or the same dialects of language. There's multiple languages in an area. Some, like Mexico, it's the Chicano identity. It's not even Latin. It's, and lumping people from that part of the world together, we don't do that so much in Canada. You really don't hear Latino used to describe a voting bloc here, even though we have, bless it makes our food really good up where I live. And I live in farmland. There's a cluster of Mexican immigrants and there's this whole strip. There's like 4 Mexican restaurants along this little, it's like 2 streets. That's the downtown of a town where I live. But there's like 4 Mexican restaurants, all different regions, so you can go and get completely different kinds of food. The decor is different. The music's slightly different. And what they consider mole is different. The different salsas, it's different. And the cultures themselves are very diverse. The different cultures are different from each other. And we flatten them all into this identifier of Latin, even Mexicans who don't necessarily self-identify as Latin. That's a shining example of how shallow demographic markers actually strip a person's personal identity away from them. And so that's where I'll land. That's a good place. I had some other comments that were really good, but we're out of time for them. And that's a good place to land. We're going to continue this discussion. I have some other kind of wonky game stuff, especially on open world experiences and that idea of dialogue. I'll mull it over the weekend and see what I come back with next week. So in the meantime, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK. Thanks for your feedback and have a great weekend. Thanks for watching.